people's princess is dead across the country, across the world.
I think when you are bereaved at a very young age, anytime really, but particularly at a young age, I can resonate closely to that. You feel pain like no other pain, and you know that in your life it's going to be very difficult to come across something that's going to be even worse pain than that.
The story of Princess Diana's death is one that touched millions of hearts around the world. Her tragic passing in 1997 left an indelible mark not just on the royal family, but on the public as well. Her two sons, Prince William and Prince Harry, were at the center of this tragedy, and they experienced grief in ways few can truly understand. But for years, Prince William has remained notably silent about his mother's death, choosing not to publicly discuss his feelings or the impact it had on him. This silence has intrigued many people, sparking questions about why he chooses not to openly share his emotions regarding such a pivotal moment in his life. William's grief journey. The death of Princess Diana in 1997 left an indelible mark on the royal family, particularly on her two young sons, William and Harry. At just 15 years old, William found himself in an impossible position. His world had been shattered, yet he was still expected to fulfill his duties as a royal. Grief, for William, couldn't simply be dealt with in private. It had to coexist with the very public role he played as the future king. One of the most striking moments of this struggle came during his mother's funeral. The world watched in shock as William, along with his younger brother Harry, walked behind Diana's coffin during the procession. This was a public display of mourning like no other. For the young princes, it was a deeply emotional moment that required them to put on a brave face and fulfill a royal duty. Imagine the weight on their shoulders, grieving the loss of their mother while knowing millions of people were watching, their every step scrutinized by the press. For William, this wasn't just a royal duty. It was a moment that forced him to balance his personal grief with the expectations placed on him as the future monarch. As he walked behind the coffin, there were mixed emotions: sorrow, anger, and perhaps a deep sense of duty to his mother's memory. While the world mourned Diana, for William, this was a personal, raw experience that few could truly understand. Over the years, William has rarely spoken about his grief in public. However, when he has shared his feelings, it's been an emotional experience for both him and his audience. In a 2017 BBC documentary marking 20 years since his mother's death, William opened up about the confusion and pain he felt during those early days of grief. He described how, at the time, he couldn't fully process what had happened. Like many who experience sudden loss, William was left questioning why this had to happen to him and his family. "I remember just feeling completely numb, disorientated, dizzy," William said in the documentary. For a young boy of 15, the loss of his mother in such a violent and sudden manner was almost too much to comprehend. The emotional confusion he felt then was something that stayed with him for years as he struggled to make sense of the pain. It was clear that, for William, the grief wasn't something that could easily be explained or understood in words. It was a process, one that would take years to unravel. This deep emotional conflict continued for years as William tried to navigate life as both a grieving son and a future king. In interviews, he has often mentioned how difficult it was to reconcile the private side of his emotions with the public role he was expected to play. There's a powerful contrast in these reflections. On one hand, he was a young man mourning the loss of his mother, and on the other, he was part of the royal family, expected to uphold the dignity and traditions of his position. The tension between these two sides of his life was undoubtedly overwhelming at times. Despite the public nature of his life, Prince William has always emphasized the importance of privacy in his grief journey. In fact, he has often spoken about how critical it was for him to have space away from the media and public attention during those early days after Diana's death. Obviously, back then, we didn't have smartphones or constant media coverage. We were fortunate to have the privacy to mourn, to collect our thoughts, and to have that space away from everybody, William said in the 2017 BBC documentary. This privacy, granted by the royal family, was a rare gift. It allowed William to process his emotions without the added pressure of being in the public eye. In many ways, it gave him the chance to just be a boy who had lost his mother, rather than a royal figure who was expected to be strong for the public. This sanctuary was invaluable as he navigated the complexities of grief, away from the constant scrutiny of the media and the royal duties that often left him little time for himself. William has mentioned that the role of his grandmother, Queen Elizabeth II, in helping shield him from the overwhelming media coverage during this time was crucial. In one interview, he recalled how his grandmother made an effort to protect him and Harry from seeing the intense media frenzy surrounding their mother's death. It was a tough decision for the Queen, balancing her responsibilities as monarch with her love and care for her grandchildren, but it was one that gave William and Harry a chance to mourn privately. Another aspect of William's grief journey that he shared with the public is how he found solace in nature, especially in the Scottish outdoors. After hearing the devastating news of his mother's passing, William was at Balmoral Castle, the royal family's residence in Scotland. In a speech many years later, William spoke about how the Scottish countryside offered him a sense of peace and refuge during those dark days. The service at Crathie Kirk that very morning, and in the dark days that followed, I found comfort and solace in the Scottish outdoors, William reflected. The beauty of the Scottish landscape provided him with an emotional escape, a place where he could process his feelings in peace, away from the chaos of royal duties and the media frenzy. For William, the hills and forests of Scotland became more than just a backdrop for his grief. They became a sanctuary, a place where he could feel a little closer to his mother and a little further from the overwhelming sadness that clouded his life at the time. This connection to Scotland remains significant for William even today. As an adult, he continues to speak fondly of the country, acknowledging that it holds both some of his happiest memories and some of his saddest. It was in Scotland that he first met his wife, Kate Middleton, and it remains a place where he and his family retreat for both joy and reflection. But the bond that William feels to Scotland, especially in the wake of his mother's death, is undeniable. The outdoor spaces offered him a break from the demands of royal life and gave him a safe place to process his grief. Changing narrative. Over time. For most of Prince William's life, the public rarely heard him speak about the tragic death of his mother, Princess Diana. His reluctance to address such a personal and painful loss became one of the mysteries of his royal life. Why did the heir to the British throne, often seen as open and approachable, choose to stay quiet about the death of the woman who had shaped much of his early years? For years, this silence sparked much speculation and curiosity among royal watchers and the general public. What was really going on behind closed doors? In the years following Diana's tragic passing in 1997, William, then just 15 years old, seemed to bury his emotions. Like many people who experience such an overwhelming loss at a young age, he was left to grapple with grief in a deeply private way. The media, in particular, was eager for any hint of what the prince might say about his mother's death. But William, who was just stepping into the role of a young royal, had other priorities. His focus, understandably, was on dealing with his grief in private. In the early years, his silence could have been attributed to a combination of personal choice and the nature of the royal family's approach to public life. The royal family, historically, has not been known for openly discussing personal emotions or grief. The Windsors, often seen as the epitome of stoicism, maintained a strong sense of duty, which meant that personal suffering was rarely displayed for public consumption. For William, this cultural expectation likely added to the weight of his grief. How could he speak openly about his mother when there were so many royal duties to attend to, and so many eyes watching him? However, as time passed, something began to shift. It's important to understand that Prince William, like many others who experience intense grief, likely found that bottling up emotions and avoiding the topic of his mother's death was not sustainable in the long term. And while he may not have been ready to open up immediately after Diana's death, it was clear that the pain of losing her would not simply fade away. It wasn't until much later that William began to speak more openly about his loss, showing a vulnerability that, in many ways, marked a significant departure from the usual royal behavior. It's important to highlight how, over time, William began to understand that sharing his grief wasn't a sign of weakness, but a sign of strength. Slowly, but surely, he began to break his silence in public forums, making it clear that the boy who once kept his emotions hidden was now ready to talk about the pain he had carried for so many years. One of the most notable moments of this shift came when William joined his brother Harry in 2017 for a BBC documentary called Diana, 7 Days. This was a landmark moment because, for the first time, the two brothers were able to speak openly about their mother's death and the grief they had experienced in the years since. In the documentary, William admitted that he still struggled with the pain of her loss, revealing that even as an adult, the emotional scars remained. He also acknowledged how his mother's death had affected him in more profound ways than he had been able to express before. This was not the typical stoic royal response we were accustomed to seeing. It was raw, honest, and incredibly moving. But perhaps the most significant change in William's approach to discussing his grief came through his active involvement in mental health advocacy. In 2016, Prince William, along with his wife, Kate Middleton, and his brother Harry, launched the Heads Together campaign, a groundbreaking initiative aimed at promoting mental health awareness and encouraging open conversations about mental well-being. The campaign's core message was clear. It's okay to talk about your feelings, especially when you're going through tough times. For William, Heads Together represented more than just a charitable cause. It became an outlet for him to channel his own experiences of loss, grief, and mental health challenges into something positive. His decision to speak out about his own struggles, particularly his battle with grief after losing Diana, served as an inspiration to many. It also sent a powerful message to others who were silently suffering from their own mental health challenges. If the Duke of Cambridge, a member of the royal family, could talk about his emotions, then surely others could too. Through the Heads Together campaign, William made it clear that mental health was not a subject to be avoided or swept under the rug. He spoke about the importance of mental health care, particularly for men, who often feel societal pressure to hide their emotions and act tough. As part of the campaign, William, Harry, and Kate engaged in open discussions with mental health professionals and those who had personally experienced mental health challenges, offering both a platform for discussion and a sense of solidarity. William's personal involvement in Heads Together has undoubtedly helped shift the narrative around mental health within the royal family and beyond. He shared his experiences with the public, including how he had struggled with his emotions in the aftermath of Diana's death. He admitted that, for many years, he didn't allow himself to process his feelings properly. This, he explained, led to long periods of stress and anxiety, which is not uncommon for those who experience a deep and unresolved loss. In the years since, William has continued to be a vocal advocate for mental health, speaking candidly about the importance of dealing with grief in a healthy and constructive way. His openness about his own struggles has been a powerful example for others, especially for men who may feel societal pressure not to express vulnerability. By sharing his own grief journey, William has helped make the topic of mental health more approachable and less stigmatized, and in doing so, he has set an example for countless individuals who are navigating their own emotional challenges. William's evolving narrative, from silence to openness, has shown the world that it is okay to face difficult emotions and share them with others. He has gradually broken down the barriers that once kept him silent about his mother's death, showing that even someone in his position is not immune to the complexities of grief and loss. It is a journey that many can relate to, whether they are public figures or private individuals. William's decision to share his grief publicly is a reflection of the changing attitudes toward mental health and emotional well-being in society. What once was considered a private matter is now being discussed openly, thanks in no small part to William's efforts to break the stigma surrounding mental health. By opening up about his own experience, William has not only honored the memory of his mother, Princess Diana, but he has also given others the courage to confront their own emotional pain and find healing in the process. As we look to the future, William's ongoing work in mental health advocacy will undoubtedly continue to inspire others to share their stories and seek help when needed. Through his example, he has shown that while grief is a deeply personal journey, it's also a shared experience that connects us all. And in that shared experience, there is hope, healing, and strength. Insights into William's silence. Prince William's silence on the death of his mother, Princess Diana, has long been a subject of intrigue and speculation. While it's easy to assume that his quietness stems from simply being a private person, the reality is much deeper. There are multiple reasons behind why William has chosen not to openly discuss such a tragic event in his life. His silence isn't just about keeping personal emotions hidden. It's also about a mix of personal emotional considerations, strategic image management, and a deep respect for how grief affects individuals in unique ways. First and foremost, Prince William's decision to maintain privacy can be traced back to personal emotional reasons. The death of a parent, especially at a young age, is an overwhelming experience. William was just 15 when his mother passed away, and the emotional toll it took on him was immense. It's entirely understandable that, after such a traumatic event, he would feel the need to guard his emotions and avoid exposing them publicly. Grief, particularly when it involves the loss of someone as beloved as Princess Diana, is something that can't easily be shared in the public eye, especially when it's accompanied by the scrutiny and pressure that comes with being a member of the royal family. As William himself has expressed in various interviews, the initial shock left him feeling confused and disoriented, not knowing how to process such deep sorrow. For many people in similar situations, it's a natural instinct to retreat into privacy during such an emotionally charged time, and William's decision to do so was likely driven by the need to protect his emotional well-being. At the same time, Prince William's silence can also be seen as part of the royal family's strategy when it comes to managing their public image. The royal family has always been under intense public scrutiny, and their personal lives are often viewed through the lens of duty and tradition. By remaining somewhat private about his grief, William was, perhaps unconsciously, aligning with the royal tradition of keeping personal matters out of the public spotlight. Royals have long been expected to maintain a composed and controlled image, even in the face of tragedy. In the case of Diana's death, while the public mourned with the family, there was also an expectation that William, as the future king, would remain strong and dutiful. Public displays of grief were complicated by his royal status, and the family often finds itself in the delicate balance between showing emotion and fulfilling their royal roles. This sense of duty likely influenced William's decision to stay silent, at least publicly, as he navigated the immense personal loss while fulfilling his responsibilities. However, there is another layer to his silence: respect for the grieving process. Grief is not a one-size-fits-all experience. It affects people in different ways, and no two people cope with loss the same way. For Prince William, grieving his mother was undoubtedly a personal and private journey. He has been open about how difficult it was to find comfort in such a painful time, but he also emphasized how important it was for him to deal with his emotions on his own terms. This respect for personal grief is something that many can relate to, regardless of their status. People who go through profound loss often find solace in solitude or in other ways that may not be visible to the public eye. William's choice to not discuss his mother's passing immediately, or to do so selectively, highlights the understanding that grieving is something deeply personal. It's not something that can always be shared, especially when the world is watching. William's approach to grief, especially over the years, has been more about quietly honoring his mother's memory and legacy, rather than dwelling on the pain. He has started to speak about her death more openly in recent years, especially through his work with mental health initiatives like Heads Together. This shift has allowed him to frame his grief in a way that could help others who are struggling with loss, making it a way to connect rather than to publicly mourn. In doing so, he has gradually opened up about his emotions, but in a way that feels right for him, slowly and on his own terms. This speaks to a larger point about the royal family's evolving attitude toward mental health and emotions, with William becoming more of an advocate for others who may be grieving in silence, just as he did. The bottom line is that Prince William's silence about his mother's death should not be seen as indifference or avoidance. Instead, it reflects a complex mix of emotional protection, royal duty, and respect for the unique ways people grieve. It's a reminder that grief is not something that can always be shared in a public space. It's deeply personal and varies greatly from person to person. As time has passed, William and Harry would continue to carry the weight of their mother's death with them. For William, his grief was something he buried deep within himself for a long time. As a teenager, he felt the pressure to be strong and composed, both for his family and for the public. His duty as a future king meant that he couldn't afford to let his emotions take over. It was only much later, as an adult, that he began to open up more about his grief and the impact it had on him. The royal family's response to Diana's death was shaped by a complex mixture of personal grief and public duty. While the Queen's efforts to protect William and Harry were crucial during the early days, it was clear that there was no easy way for the young princes to process such a monumental loss. The experience of grief, especially for someone as young as William, is never linear. It is a journey that is personal, sometimes private, and often difficult to navigate. And for William, as he later acknowledged, it would be a long time before he could fully process the depth of his loss and what it meant for his life moving forward. Now, we want to hear your thoughts. Do you think Prince William's silence was the best way to cope with his grief? Or do you believe he should have spoken more openly about it? Drop a comment below to share your perspective. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and share it with others who might find this story just as captivating. Be sure to subscribe to our channel so you never miss out on more royal insights.
Prince Harry sharing painful and deeply personal details of the family rift that rocked the British royal family and the world.
I don't think that we can ever have peace with my family unless the truth is out there.
The unlikely standoff at Kensington Palace. A seemingly ordinary day at Kensington Palace turned into one of the most unforgettable moments in recent royal history. Prince Harry and Prince William, two of the most talked about royals, found themselves at the center of an unexpected spectacle, one that was not caused by any royal scandal, but rather by a simple family visit. What started as a casual trip for Queen Camilla's daughter, Laura Parker Bowles, quickly escalated into a full-blown comedy of errors. At the gates of the palace, Laura found herself blocked by an unlikely figure, the royal family's longtime nanny, a woman known for her strict adherence to palace rules. For years, this nanny had been a staple in the royal household, a figure of authority who had kept the palace in check with unshakable resolve. But today, her no-nonsense approach would clash with the royal family's more modern views. As Laura was prevented from entering the palace, the situation quickly spiraled from confusing to hilarious. What could have been a routine family gathering became a battleground for royal protocol, tradition, and, most surprisingly, humor. Would the nanny relent? Would family ties be tested to the breaking point? And why was a seemingly simple visit causing such an uproar? The answers would come in the most unexpected ways, and the royal family would soon learn that even the strictest rules can be bent, sometimes for the sake of a good laugh. As the story unfolded, everyone began to realize that the nanny wasn't just protecting the palace, she was guarding an old and cherished tradition. But was it worth the chaos that followed? Little did anyone know, this moment at the gates would go down as one of the most absurd and hilarious royal dramas ever. What happens next is something even the royal family couldn't have predicted. The unexpected visitor Kensington Palace, an iconic symbol of British royalty, had seen countless royal visits over the years, but nothing quite like this. Laura Parker Bowles, daughter of Queen Camilla, had been invited by her stepbrother Prince William for a casual family visit. As she approached the gates, there was nothing unusual about the scene. The palace was as majestic as always, and Laura had visited many times before. But today, something was different. Today, she would meet a formidable force at the entrance. The royal nanny, a woman who had served the family for decades, stood at her usual post. She had always been an integral part of the palace's inner workings, managing everything from the royal children's schedules to overseeing the everyday operations of the household. Her reputation for strict adherence to the rules was well known, and she didn't hesitate for a second when Laura arrived. The gates were closed, and despite Laura's claim of being family, the nanny stood her ground. No entry without proper clearance, she declared. Laura was taken aback. She had never been stopped before, and yet today, she found herself in a confrontation she never expected. The nanny's behavior was puzzling. Why was she being so strict? Was there some deeper issue at play? And why now, of all times, was the nanny so adamant about following protocol to the letter? It seemed like a small misunderstanding, yet it quickly escalated into something much larger. Laura began to question whether her connection to the royal family, something she had always taken for granted, was truly as secure as she thought. As the standoff continued, tensions mounted, and a shocking revelation about the nanny's mysterious behavior started to emerge. Was this just a simple misunderstanding, or was there more to the story? Media frenzy begins. As the situation at the gates grew more absurd, word quickly spread throughout the palace, and within moments, the entire staff was buzzing with excitement and confusion. The news that Laura was being blocked by the nanny reached Prince William and Prince Harry, who, at first, thought it was a joke. But the more they heard about the situation, the more they realized it was real. The nanny, known for her unwavering loyalty and strict rule-following, was not about to let anyone through without the proper clearance. Not even Laura. The brothers, both well accustomed to dealing with the media and the scrutiny that came with being members of the royal family, found themselves in the middle of a spectacle that no one could have predicted. As the news began to spread, the palace gates turned into the epicenter of a media frenzy. Journalists and photographers, always eager to capture the smallest bit of royal drama, quickly gathered outside, hoping to get a glimpse of the unfolding standoff. The tabloids had already latched onto the story, spinning headlines about the royal gatekeeper and the palace blockade. What started as a family visit quickly became the talk of the town, with royal watchers and media outlets eager to analyze every move. Prince Harry, ever the jokester, found the whole thing rather amusing, but even he could see that the situation was getting out of hand. The media, as always, would turn any story into a circus, and this was no exception. But behind the comedy was a serious question. Why had the nanny gone to such lengths to stop Laura from entering the gates? With the media now involved, the situation was about to escalate beyond anyone's control. But the truth behind the nanny's actions was still hidden. What was her real motive? The hidden power of the nanny. The more the brothers delved into the situation, the more they realized that the nanny was no ordinary staff member. She wasn't just a caretaker or a supervisor. She was a guardian of royal tradition. Her role in the palace had grown over the years, and she had become as much a fixture of royal life as the crown itself. Known for her loyalty and commitment to maintaining order, she had earned the trust and respect of every member of the royal family. But there was something more, something deeper, that motivated her to act with such authority. As the standoff continued, Prince William began to investigate the situation more thoroughly. What he discovered was both fascinating and unsettling. The nanny's strict adherence to the rules was not just about protecting the family's privacy. It was about preserving a sense of order that she felt was slipping away. For years, the royal family had faced increasing scrutiny, and the nanny's role had evolved into one of safeguarding their legacy. But was this constant vigilance leading her to make decisions that went beyond her remit? Prince Harry, meanwhile, took a more light-hearted approach to the drama. While William was deeply entrenched in figuring out the motivations behind the nanny's actions, Harry couldn't help but joke about the situation. He commented that the nanny's gatekeeping skills were unmatched, likening her to a secret agent tasked with protecting the royal family from all threats, real or imagined. But as the hours wore on, even Harry had to acknowledge that something wasn't quite right. The nanny's behavior seemed more like a test of loyalty than a simple enforcement of rules. The deeper Prince William dug, the more he uncovered about the nanny's mysterious role in the palace. But was her dedication to tradition helping or hindering the royal family? The family confrontation. As the day continued and the standoff persisted, the royal family was left to grapple with the situation at hand. Queen Camilla, who had sent Laura to visit, was both perplexed and somewhat embarrassed. Her daughter was being blocked from entering her own family's palace, and for what? A failure to follow some obscure protocol? Camilla, though used to royal rules, found herself questioning the nanny's judgment. The situation soon reached a boiling point. After hours of negotiation, Prince William decided to intervene directly, and the palace doors were finally opened. But what happened next was truly unexpected. The nanny, who had steadfastly refused to allow Laura entry, finally relented, but only after a private conversation with William. No one knew what was said behind those closed doors, but when the gates were finally opened, there was an air of resolution. The family gathered inside the palace, the mood a mix of relief and tension. What had started as a simple visit had now become a defining moment for the royal family. Was the nanny's unyielding stance a sign of her deep loyalty to the monarchy, or had she overstepped her bounds? Prince Harry, who had spent most of the day joking about the situation, now saw the deeper implications. What happened behind the scenes between William and the nanny? And was the family truly united, or were cracks starting to show in their carefully constructed facade? The media spin. As the royal family's internal drama unfolded, the media was quick to seize on the story. The headlines were everywhere, each one more sensational than the last. Royal nanny blocks Camilla's daughter from entering palace, read one headline, while another claimed, family tensions at Kensington Palace as nanny refuses to let in royal member. The press, always eager to turn any royal incident into a spectacle, had turned what could have been a small misunderstanding into the latest royal scandal. But as the days passed, the story took on a life of its own. The press speculated endlessly about the motivations behind the nanny's actions. Was she simply following protocol, or was there something more personal at play? The tabloids, ever hungry for a juicy story, turned every possible detail into a headline, with little regard for the truth. The royal family was no longer in control of the narrative. The media had taken over, twisting the story into whatever served their agenda. The royal family, used to the media's attention, couldn't ignore the impact this story was having. The nanny, once a trusted and respected figure, was now being portrayed as a villain in the eyes of the public. And yet, behind the headlines, the family remained united, trying to protect their own from the relentless media machine. As the media circus continued, the royal family's reputation hung in the balance. What would happen next? Would the family survive this latest scandal, or would it tear them apart? The strain on family ties. Behind the closed doors of the palace, the royal family was left to reflect on the day's events. The standoff at the gates had been embarrassing for everyone involved, but it also exposed underlying tensions that had been simmering beneath the surface for years. For Queen Camilla, the incident was a reminder of the delicate balance she had to maintain between her new role within the royal family and her relationship with her children from her previous marriage. Her daughter, Laura, had always felt like an outsider in the royal fold, though she had been included in many family gatherings. This incident, however, brought her feelings of alienation to the forefront. Despite being the daughter of Queen Camilla, Laura had often been overshadowed by the more prominent figures in the family, especially her royal stepbrothers, Prince William and Prince Harry. The fact that she was blocked from entering the palace by a figure who had been a part of their lives for so long only emphasized her position as an outsider. For Prince William, this incident had forced him to confront the complexities of royal life and the pressures of tradition. He had always been a proponent of maintaining the royal family's legacy and order, but the nanny's rigid adherence to protocol had caused more harm than good. He found himself questioning whether tradition was worth the damage it had done to his family's relationships. How could he reconcile his duties to the monarchy with his personal feelings for his family? And more importantly, how could he manage to keep things from spiraling further out of control? Prince Harry, on the other hand, found himself caught between his brother's serious nature and his own irreverence. He understood that something deeper was going on, but he also knew that humor was his way of coping with the absurdity of the situation. Still, even he couldn't ignore the emotional toll it had taken on everyone. As much as he wanted to deflect and make jokes, he knew that his family's public image had been damaged, and it was unclear if they could ever fully recover from the fallout. The tension inside the palace was palpable, and the fallout from the standoff at the gates would linger far longer than anyone expected. Was this just the beginning of an unraveling of royal unity, or would they find a way to put their differences aside? The nanny's secret. As the royal family dealt with the aftermath of the palace gate incident, a startling revelation came to light. It wasn't just a matter of rules being enforced. The nanny, it seemed, had been operating under a sense of duty far more personal than anyone had realized. For years, the nanny had been the family's most trusted member, one who not only cared for the royal children, but also served as a quiet protector of their image. Her strict nature and loyalty had earned her the respect of the family, But there was more to her than met the eye. She had become not just an enforcer of palace protocol, but a silent guardian of royal tradition. A tradition she believed was slipping through the cracks of modernity. The monarchy, as it had been traditionally known, was under increasing scrutiny, and the nanny had come to see herself as the last line of defense. She had taken it upon herself to uphold the legacy of the royal family, believing that the family's image must be preserved at all costs. Her actions at the gates of Kensington Palace, though seemingly harsh, were a reflection of her deep, perhaps misguided sense of loyalty to the crown. What she had failed to see was the emotional cost of her actions. Her duty to protect the royal family's image had blinded her to the needs of the very people she sought to protect. Prince William, for one, had seen the damage her actions had caused and felt torn between his loyalty to the family and his desire to protect his own family's well-being. The revelation about the nanny's motivations gave the family a new perspective on her role within the palace. She wasn't just a figure who followed orders. She was a person with her own complex emotions and an unwavering sense of duty. But the real question was, had her actions caused irreparable harm to the royal family's unity? As the truth about the nanny's motivations came to light, the royal family was faced with a difficult question. Could the damage caused by her strict adherence to tradition ever be undone? Or was the legacy of royal protocol too deep to be shaken? A family divided. The aftermath of the Palace Gate incident revealed fractures within the royal family that had long been ignored. Despite their public appearances of unity, the members of the royal family were often divided by hidden tensions. This event, though seemingly trivial, brought those tensions to the surface, forcing each family member to confront their own relationships with tradition, loyalty, and each other. Prince William, caught between his role as a future monarch and his desire to protect his family, found himself at a crossroads. He could no longer ignore the complexities of royal life. As much as he had dedicated himself to the monarchy, he began to question whether he had been sacrificing his personal happiness for the sake of duty. His relationship with his brother, Harry, had always been complicated, but now, even that bond was being tested. Harry's irreverence and humor, while often a source of light in difficult times, had become a point of contention. William was increasingly frustrated with Harry's reluctance to take things seriously. Yet, despite their differences, both brothers shared a common understanding. The royal family as it stood was fragile, and every action they took had the potential to alter its future. Queen Camilla, watching the drama unfold, found herself caught between her loyalty to her husband, King Charles, and her desire to protect her children. Laura, her daughter from her previous marriage, had always felt like an outsider in the royal fold. Camilla had done her best to make Laura feel included, but the tension that had existed between them for years was now more palpable than ever. The nanny's actions had made Laura's position in the family even more tenuous, and it seemed as though she would always be seen as an outsider, no matter how much she tried to fit in. In the end, it was clear that the royal family had been tested in ways they had never anticipated. The public spectacle, fueled by the media frenzy, had laid bare the fragile nature of their unity. Each family member had their own take on the situation, and while some were eager to move on, others couldn't forget the deep rift that had formed in the wake of the events. As the royal family continued to grapple with their differences, one question lingered. Could they ever truly heal the divisions that had been exposed? Or was the royal family destined to remain fractured forever? The royal media circus. The royal family's image, once carefully curated and protected, had now become a subject of relentless scrutiny. The media, always hungry for a story, had turned the gates of Kensington Palace into the epicenter of royal drama. As the situation unfolded, the press painted the nanny's actions as part of a larger narrative of royal dysfunction. Headlines blared about family infighting and royal dysfunction, with each report more sensational than the last. The nanny, once a beloved figure behind palace walls, was now being vilified in the public eye. The media, as always, had a unique ability to turn even the smallest incident into a full-blown scandal. This time, however, the royals were caught in a whirlwind of their own making. While the family had hoped to keep the situation private, the media's reach was too powerful. Photos of Laura standing at the gates with the nanny blocking her entry quickly went viral. The tabloids had a field day, offering wild speculation about the family's inner turmoil. As the press frenzy continued, the royal family was forced to navigate the increasingly difficult situation. Each statement, each public appearance, was carefully choreographed to try to minimize the damage. But no matter what they did, the media seemed to have the upper hand. The family's every move was scrutinized, and even their attempts to move past the incident only seemed to fuel the fire. The public perception of the royal family had been altered irrevocably. Once a symbol of stability and tradition, they were now seen as just another celebrity family caught in a scandal. And for the first time in years, the monarchy's future seemed uncertain. With the media spinning the situation out of control, the royal family was left to pick up the pieces. Would they be able to reclaim their image, or was this incident the beginning of a new chapter in their history? The resolution. In the end, the palace's internal drama had reached a breaking point. The nanny, who had once been a symbol of unwavering loyalty to the royal family, finally acknowledged the consequences of her actions. She realized that her strict adherence to tradition had caused unnecessary turmoil within the family, and the damage could not be undone by simply reopening the gates. For Prince William and Prince Harry, the incident had been a wake-up call. They had always known that being part of the royal family came with immense responsibility, but the events at the gates made them realize just how fragile that responsibility truly was. The monarchy's future, as they both knew, was built on public perception and unity. If the royal family couldn't navigate their personal differences and protect each other from the media's prying eyes, their legacy would be at risk. As the royal family gathered to discuss the events that had transpired, it was clear that they had to come together, not just for the sake of the monarchy, but for the sake of each other. Despite the chaos that had unfolded, they found a way to heal the rifts and rebuild their bond. The nanny, having seen the damage she had caused, apologized for her actions, and the family agreed to move forward, learning from the experience. The incident at Kensington Palace, though hilarious and chaotic, had brought the royal family closer together. It had exposed the cracks in their carefully constructed image, but it also allowed them to rebuild it stronger than before. The monarchy, like any family, was imperfect, but it was also resilient, and it was clear that they would continue to endure. After the storm had passed, the royal family found strength in their unity. But would the public ever forget the day the gates of Kensington Palace became the scene of a royal standoff? Only time would tell. The aftermath: a family reconciled? The gates of Kensington Palace, once a symbol of security and grandeur, had now become a symbol of dysfunction. The royal family's public image had taken a hit, and the press continued to run wild with speculation. But behind the closed doors of the palace, the family was beginning to pick up the pieces. The media's attention had only intensified the pressure, and with each new headline, the royal family was forced to confront the reality of what had happened. Queen Camilla, who had initially been embarrassed by the media frenzy, took it upon herself to bring her family back together. She knew that the royal family's unity was the key to maintaining their standing in the eyes of the public. The nanny, once a figure of unquestioned authority, was now the subject of widespread scrutiny. But she wasn't the only one to blame. Camilla herself had been forced to reckon with her own role in the drama. The incident had exposed the deep-rooted tensions within the family, tensions that had long been hidden beneath the polished surface of their public appearances. For Laura, the visit had become more than just a family gathering. It had become a reflection of the complicated nature of her relationship with her step-family. Though she had always been accepted as family, this incident made her feel more like an outsider than ever before. She had always struggled with her position in the royal family, and the events at the gates only highlighted her insecurities. For Prince William, the entire situation had been a wake-up call. He had always prided himself on his ability to maintain the royal family's reputation, but he was beginning to realize that the weight of that responsibility might be more than he could bear. The nanny's actions, though driven by her loyalty to the monarchy, had exposed a gap between what the royal family needed and what the public expected. William, who had always followed tradition, found himself questioning whether those traditions were truly serving his family, or if they were holding them back from evolving. Prince Harry, as always, had found humor in the chaos. but even he couldn't ignore the emotional toll the situation had taken on everyone. The brothers, though vastly different in their approach to life, had been forced to confront the fact that their family wasn't as invulnerable as they had once thought. The gates of Kensington Palace, once a symbol of royal strength, had now become a battleground for competing values. With the media breathing down their necks and tensions running high within the palace, the royal family had to decide whether to embrace the future or hold on to the past. Would they ever be able to reconcile their differences, or had the damage been done? The royal rebuilding. The royal family, now fully aware of the damage done by the gate incident, began the painstaking process of rebuilding their image and their relationships. Prince William, determined to regain control of the situation, called a family meeting. The purpose was clear: to resolve the lingering tension and to ensure that their future as a family, both in public and private, was secure. Prince Harry, ever the optimist, offered a lighter perspective. While William focused on the logistics of repairing their public image, Harry insisted that they needed to find a way to laugh at the situation. The absurdity of a nanny blocking Laura at the gates had, in Harry's mind, become something of a legend, a story they would all tell with laughter in the years to come. But despite the humor, it was clear that the wounds from the incident ran deep. The family knew they couldn't simply laugh it off. They had to address the emotional toll it had taken on them individually and as a unit. Laura, who had spent so many years feeling like an outsider, was particularly affected by the standoff. The nanny's actions had reinforced her position as someone who wasn't fully embraced by the royal fold. Despite the family's efforts to make her feel included, she had always struggled to truly find her place. The events at the gates only made that feeling more pronounced. Queen Camilla, who had been dealing with her own feelings of guilt and frustration, was determined to make things right. She reached out to Laura, speaking to her openly about the complexities of their relationship and the misunderstandings that had been a part of their dynamic for years. Camilla acknowledged that her daughter's feelings of isolation were valid, and she promised to do more to make her feel like an integral part of the royal family. At the same time, the royal family knew that they had to regain the public's trust. The media had torn into them from every angle, and it was clear that their carefully constructed image of perfection was no longer viable. In the age of social media, where every misstep was scrutinized, the royal family's every move would be under constant observation. It was no longer enough to rely on tradition alone. They needed to adapt to the changing times and rebuild their reputation from the ground up. As the royal family worked through their emotional baggage and began the process of rebuilding their public image, a new challenge arose. How could they navigate a world that no longer believed in royal infallibility? Well, that was a royal mess, wasn't it? From a strict nanny to a media frenzy, this bizarre moment at Kensington Palace has shaken things up in ways no one saw coming. What's next for the royal family? Will they learn from their mistakes or continue to clash with tradition? Drop your thoughts in the comments and make sure to hit like and subscribe for more shocking royal moments. You won't want to miss what happens next.